If this video has found you right now, pause for a moment and notice something very important. You weren't searching randomly. You weren't scrolling mindlessly. This message didn't arrive because the algorithm guessed correctly. It arrived because something in you has already stopped responding to force. And that's exactly why this must reach you now. For years, you were told to manifest harder, visualize more, repeat affirmations louder, control your thoughts, police your emotions, correct your mindset every second of the day. You were told that if reality didn't bend, it meant you weren't doing enough. And you believed it. Not because it felt true, but because you wanted change badly enough to accept the blame. But here's the truth that almost no one says out loud. Forcing manifestation is the fastest way to block it. Not because you're weak, but because force broadcasts distortion. Most manifestation techniques are built on tension, wanting, needing, chasing, correcting yourself, trying to override what is with what should be. That energy doesn't signal clarity, it signals lack. It tells the field that you are separate from what you want, and separation is exactly what keeps the loop running. That's why so many people do everything right and still feel stuck. They're pushing against the very thing they're trying to align with. This message isn't here to tell you to give up manifestation. It's here to show you why it stopped working the moment you began forcing it. Because manifestation was never meant to be a technique. It was meant to be a state, and states can't be forced. They can only be entered. There's a reason you've felt resistance every time you try to control outcomes lately. A reason affirmations suddenly feel hollow. A reason visualizing the future creates pressure instead of excitement. That friction is not failure, it's feedback. Something in you is no longer compatible with distortion-based creation. You've outgrown the push model. This is where the monad call comes in, not as a ritual, not as a phrase, not as a method you perform, but as a shift in orientation. The monad call isn't about asking reality for something. It's about returning to the frequency that reality already responds to. When you hear the word call, don't imagine sound. Imagine signal. A resonance, a coherence that doesn't demand, doesn't chase, doesn't negotiate. The reason this breaks matrix-style control systems is simple. Control structures feed on reaction, urgency, fear, and effort. They thrive when you're trying to fix yourself, improve yourself, correct yourself. When you stop pushing and start orienting, there's nothing left to harvest. No emotional friction, no energetic leakage, just clarity. This is why so many people feel a strange calm right before everything changes. Not excitement, not hype, calm, stillness, almost boredom. That's coherence settling in. And coherence is louder than desire ever was. The monad call doesn't say, "Give me," it says, "I am aligned." And alignment doesn't need proof. It doesn't need repetition. It doesn't need belief reinforcement. It simply holds its position. When you're in that state, things move toward you naturally, quietly, sometimes even invisibly at first. This is why nothing dramatic may have happened yet. Because real shifts don't announce themselves. They reorganize quietly. Old loops dissolve. Certain people drift away without conflict. Opportunities show up without urgency. You don't chase them, you notice them. If you've been feeling like you're standing still while something rearranges beneath the surface, that's not stagnation. That's recalibration. The system you are operating in no longer recognizes your signal, and that's a good thing. It means you're no longer transmitting from lack. The reason this message triggers strong reactions is because it removes the illusion of control while restoring actual agency. You don't command reality. You resonate with it. And when your signal stabilizes, reality mirrors it effortlessly. This is also why fear-based narratives lose their grip at this stage. You don't feel the need to fight invisible enemies anymore. You don't need to escape the matrix by force. You simply stop feeding it. Systems collapse when attention withdraws. Control dissolves when coherence replaces reaction. If this feels familiar, if something in you is quietly nodding instead of getting excited, that's the sign. Awakening doesn't scream. It settles. It simplifies. It removes excess effort. It replaces doing with being, not as a philosophy, but as a lived experience. From here on, manifestation looks different. It's subtle. It's precise. It's less emotional and more grounded. You don't imagine futures obsessively. You recognize alignment when it appears. You don't force doors open. You notice which ones stop resisting. If you've made it this far, don't forget to subscribe for daily cosmic insights, astrology updates, and spiritual guidance, because the universe always has a message for you. And the most important part is this: you don't need to convince anyone. When the monad call activates, explanation becomes unnecessary. Your presence carries the signal. People feel it. Situations adjust to it. You stop trying to be understood, and somehow everything starts making sense. If you're still watching, it means this message wasn't just informational, it was confirmational. You weren't meant to push anymore. You were meant to orient, to stabilize, to hold coherence without effort. And from that place, reality doesn't need to be manifested. It responds. There's something else happening beneath the surface that almost no one talks about, and if you've reached this point, you've already felt it. The exhaustion, not physical tiredness, but a deep fatigue with pretending that effort equals progress. You've noticed that the more you try to fix your life, the more artificial everything feels, like you're acting in a role you no longer believe in. That's not laziness. That's integrity waking up. When the old manifestation loop breaks, people panic. They think they're losing motivation. They think they're becoming passive. But what's actually happening is much more precise. The part of you that used to run on pressure has shut down. And it shut down on purpose. Because pressure was never power. Pressure was compensation. This is where many people turn back. They readopt techniques. They go back to affirmations. They double down on routines. They convince themselves that discomfort means they need to try harder. But the ones who don't turn back notice something strange. When they stop forcing, reality doesn't collapse. It starts responding in quieter ways. The monad call activates here, not as a moment, but as a recognition. You realize that nothing needs to be summoned. Nothing is missing. The future isn't somewhere else. It's already forming around the signal you're holding now. And that realization alone dissolves urgency. Urgency is the currency of control systems. When urgency disappears, so does manipulation. You stop reacting to timelines that aren't yours. You stop racing invisible clocks. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never meant to understand your phase. This is why silence becomes powerful at this stage. Not withdrawal, not isolation, silence. You speak less, but when you do, it lands. You move less, but when you do, things shift. The noise falls away because it can't synchronize with coherence. And if you've been feeling like your old personality doesn't fit anymore, that's because it was built for a different frequency. You're not losing yourself. You're shedding signal distortion. Now, Let's talk about the part people misunderstand the most. The monad call doesn't make life perfect. It makes it honest. And honesty can feel uncomfortable before it feels liberating. When coherence settles in, anything built on misalignment becomes visible. Jobs feel hollow. Conversations feel scripted. Goals feel borrowed. This is why some people experience a temporary sense of emptiness. They think they've lost desire, but desire hasn't disappeared. False desire has. The desires that were inherited, imposed, or manufactured by comparison simply fall away. What remains is quieter, but it's real. This is also why so many awakenings look unproductive from the outside. No big announcements, no dramatic breakthroughs, just subtle detachment from things that once consumed attention. You stop needing validation. You stop chasing momentum. You stop explaining your growth to people who can't feel it. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to prove your alignment is the moment reality starts reflecting it. Opportunities show up without hype. Help arrives without asking. Timing improves without planning. Not because you deserve it, not because you earned it, but because coherence is efficient. It doesn't waste energy negotiating with resistance. The matrix only works when you believe you must struggle to exist. When you realize existence responds to signal, the entire structure loses leverage. That's why this phase feels dangerous to systems built on effort and fear. There's nothing to hook into. If you've noticed people reacting differently to you lately, this is why. Some feel calm around you, others feel uncomfortable. Coherence exposes distortion without confrontation. You don't need to challenge anyone. Your presence does it automatically. And if you've been wondering why you feel ahead of something you can't name yet, trust that. You're not early. You're aligned. There's a moment in this process where you stop asking, "What should I do next?" And that moment terrifies people who still believe control equals safety. But for you, it feels oddly relieving, because you finally realize that clarity doesn't come from planning. It comes from stability. When your signal stabilizes, action becomes obvious. Not rushed, not dramatic. Obvious. You don't debate it. You don't overthink it. You simply move when the movement feels clean. This is the difference between effort and alignment. Effort argues. Alignment recognizes. This is also why time feels different now. Days pass faster or slower without explanation. You're less attached to deadlines, more sensitive to rhythm. You stop asking, "How long will this take?" and start noticing, "Is this ready?" Readiness replaces impatience, and readiness can't be faked. The monad call isn't something you perform daily, it's something you stop interrupting. The more you leave it alone, the clearer it becomes. That's why trying to teach it as a method always fails. Methods require repetition. States require permission. And here's the part that triggers the most comments. When you stop manifesting, life doesn't stop expanding. It expands more precisely. Fewer things happen, but the right things happen. The chaos thins out. The noise loses relevance. If you've been feeling strangely protected lately, like certain problems just don't reach you anymore, that's not luck. That's resonance filtering reality. At this stage, you may notice something subtle but important. You don't resonate with panic-driven content anymore. Fear-based predictions, urgent warnings, countdown narratives. They feel distant, almost theatrical. That's because your nervous system is no longer being hijacked by external signals. Control collapses when fear loses access. This is why you don't need to fight the matrix. Fighting still feeds it. You simply stop responding to its language. Scarcity, urgency, comparison, outrage. None of it translates at this frequency. Instead, life starts communicating through intuition, timing, and synchronicity. Not dramatic signs, practical ones. You're guided toward efficiency, not spectacle. You also become less interested in convincing others. You recognize that awakening isn't contagious through argument. It spreads through presence, through calm, through consistency. Some people will drift away because they can't mirror your signal. Others will suddenly feel drawn to you without knowing why. Both are correct outcomes. And if you've been questioning whether you're doing enough, understand this clearly. Coherence doesn't measure effort. It measures alignment. You can't do coherence. You allow it. This is why the most powerful phase looks uneventful. Nothing flashy, nothing to prove, just quiet authority over your own state. If this entire message feels less like information and more like recognition, that's intentional. You didn't need new knowledge. You needed confirmation that stopping wasn't failure, that resting in clarity wasn't laziness, that disengaging from force wasn't giving up. You didn't abandon manifestation. You graduated from it. From here on, creation happens sideways, indirectly, naturally. You won't always see it forming, but you'll feel when it locks in. And when it does, there's no doubt, no anxiety, no chasing. The monad call isn't a secret, it's just quiet. And quiet things are invisible to systems built on noise. If you've stayed until the end, trust that something in you already knows what to do next. Not because you were told, but because coherence doesn't need instruction. It remembers.